episode 4. Yeah, and maybe a slightly contentious one. Is it an EP or is it a mini album? 6 tracks, 30 minutes, you decide. But most sources nowadays openly tend to classify this as an EP, which is good enough for me. This is Sugar, and this is Beaster. Darren again, and Sugar. Yeah, Bob Mould, the singer, songwriter, guitarist, his return to the hallowed power trio format that brought him, to the world's attention in the first half of the 1980s. Yeah, I'm talking there, of course, about Husker Du, and here, in as short a space of time as I can possibly manage, is the trail from Husker Du all the way up to Sugar and Beaster. So, forming in 1979, initially as a 4-piece, Husker Du quickly slimmed down to a trio. And yeah, the band were a part of the burgeoning Twin Cities hardcore scene. 2 singer-songwriters in this band, in the form of Bob Mould on guitar and drummer Grant Hart, with Greg Norton on bass. Yeah, writing, playing and recording locally, they were in the space of a year or two, one of the earliest Midwest hardcore bands to break out, touring that network of venues, clubs, houses, squats even, that supported early scene mates such as Black Flag, the Minutemen, Dead Kennedys, Minor Threat. Eventually signing with Greg Ginn's SST label, the band went on to release a series of EPs and LPs, starting with Metal Circus, onto Zen Arcade, New Day Rising, and Flip Your Wig. And with each release, seemingly, they were refining their sound, pulling free from that harder and faster hardcore straitjacket, and increasing melodic complexity, vocal harmonies, still retaining that burning, noisy, adrenalized ferocity. So this creative direction they were taking, coupled with an increasingly large fan base via touring and college radio airplay, brought the band to the attention of the major labels. This made them, I think, along with fellow Twin City residents, The Replacements, in my opinion, the first of the hardcore bands, to really break, if you like, when they signed with Warner's, with whom they released 2 albums, Candy Apple Grey and Warehouse Songs and Stories, another double album, in 1986 and 1987, respectively. And whilst at the time these albums were highly critically lauded, this didn't really translate into the sales breakthrough that Warner's may have hoped for. And a combination of this, the creative tensions within the band between Hart and Bob Mould, the drug problems, drink problems, their manager's suicide, it led to the band's breakup early in 1988. Following the split, Bob and Grant went their separate ways, but both released solo albums the following year in 1989. Bob Mould with his Workbook album, a kind of a much more modern, cleaner kind of folk rock masterpiece, in my opinion. And Grant releasing Intolerance, a much looser, more patchwork collection, heavily influenced by 60s pop. For his solo work, Bob had assembled a band containing Tony Mamone of Perubu and the late Anton Fire of the Golden Palominos, amongst others. And it was that band that recorded and toured the Workbook album. But this lineup only lasted for one more album, with 1990s follow-up, the darker, bluesier, much kind of grungier, I guess you would say, Black Sheets of Rain. Following the release of that album and a very short tour, Bob dissolved that group. And Bob followed that up with a year or so of just, songwriting and doing some solo tours, just himself and a 12-string acoustic, during which time he wrote and kind of road tested, I guess you'd say, a lot of the material that would end up on the debut Sugar album, that would be 1992's Copper Blue. And Sugar again were a power trio, with Bob taking the vast majority of the singing and songwriting duties, with David Barb, ex of Mercyland, on bass, and Malcolm Travis, ex Customized, amongst others, on drums. And finally, that brings us up to Beaster. Yeah, this was released in April of 1993, just in time for Easter that year. Yeah, and the EP has 6 tracks recorded from the same session that led to Copper Blue, which I find very, very interesting. This isn't an EP written and conceived as an EP. These are essentially 6 songs that just kind of fit together out of a larger body of material. So why talk about this one? What makes it work so well as an EP? I'm not sure, but I actually think that this might be the single definitive Sugar release that you would need. And I say that as someone who really, really loves Copper Blue too. Sonically, as you'd expect, it's from the same session. It's absolutely cut from the same cloth as the rest of Copper Blue. Yeah, those huge, churning, kind of sustaining, droning chords of Bob's. Always using those suspended kind of chord notes just hanging there, tying the chord changes together. Yeah, some very classic, understated, firm, unshowy kind of bedrock bass, I think, from Dave Barb across the entire of Sugar's back catalogue. And on this release particularly, you get some thunderous kind of Gatling gun snare runs from Malcolm Travis, really puncturing that kind of wheezing, omnipresent curtain of guitar. Yeah, in many ways, it's a kind of a classic 90s alt-rock production. But I think, anyway, a signature sound that hasn't outstayed its welcome in the same way that some grunge albums of the same era have. Naming names, I could single out Butch Vig here, but that would be a bit of a cheap shot and lacking in class. I honestly think it still sounds great just because of that Bob Mould guitar sound here. It's the ultimate evolution, if you like, of that compressed, high-focused grinding sustain of his. Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's a really influential sound. I think Kevin Shields of My Bloody Valentine has quoted, the Bob Mould, the Husker Du guitar sound as a big influence. Those blanket frequencies he seems to be able to hit, to amplify and sustain them till they're kind of borderline painful. Yeah, and I'm definitely not saying here that, Bob Mould in some way invented that strand of shoegaze sound. But I think if you were to draw a Venn diagram of musical styles here with, shoegaze and hardcore and rock music, the point where they all overlap would definitely have Bob Mould squarely in the middle of it. Anyway, on to the songs themselves and the overall structure of the record. I think for an EP of, session songs, it's supremely well sequenced to the point where you can easily trace a thematic arc from start to finish. Yeah, it's almost like kind of like a Zen arcade in miniature. Yeah, Come Around, the opener, is a gorgeous, almost kind of wordless scene or a mood setter. What you come around is the only line that I think I can hear in there, but that's it. The rest is just this multi-tracked, harmonizing, almost, choral vocals over a simple, shifting, kind of breathing chord sequence, which does put me in mind of My Bloody Valentine in some ways. Tilted, yeah, this is the upset, this is the crisis, the argument, the breaking point of the EP. It's this manic, breakneck rocker with some truly heart-stopping dynamic shifts, and it's got that solo in it. Yeah, it's the kind of high-velocity shredding that, Bob really held back on. He didn't unleash it very often, but when he did, it's just completely devastating. And I think the solo here on Tilted is just one of the greatest things that he ever performed on guitar. And next up comes Judas Cradle. Yeah, this is the guilt, the kind of the self-flagellation, the feelings of betrayal and of pain embodied. Strong elements here of religious imagery, the idea of the Judas and of the Judas Cradle itself, this torture device, something far, far more gruesome than I'm going to explain here, which was used by medieval inquisitors. Yeah, punishing, pained, deeply emotional song. Next is JC Auto, which is almost the kind of the realization, the transfiguration. Again, Easter, the religious motifs of Jesus Christ, of crucifixion, they keep coming up. But here also, I think we get some more directly personal stuff. Yeah, and the giveaway is that auto in the title. In case you missed it, it seems to highlight, this thing that's happening. This is autobiographical. Yeah, there's a hidden callback to another of his songs here, both lyrically and musically. Yeah, in the following line, parts of it seem over now. You expect a real solution. Yeah, this line hides the title of a key track from his debut solo album Workbook, that track being Poison Years. Yeah, that's Poisonyears. And in that track, in Poison Years, that contains this line, in an act like Jesus Christ, stare into the sun. You don't see eye to eye with anyone. Yeah, another kind of Jesus metaphor, but in this song it sounds much more like he's directly addressing his time with Grant Hart towards, the horrible, dark end days of their time with Husker Du. So why the callback? I think JC also feels like Bob trying to kind of redress the balance. He's accepting his own role in the demise of Husker Du. He's lashing inwards instead of out. Yeah, he sings towards the song's conclusion. I became the big disgrace. I know that I'm the ugly face. I need some time to reconcile. I need some time to heal a while. And that musical callback, yeah, the chord changes, the vocal melody of the choruses of Poison Years and JC Auto, they are almost identical. Yeah, as a piece of writing, it's still a pretty bitter attempt at reconciling with past misdeeds, I guess. But it's at least acknowledging some stuff that had been, it seems, eating away at Bob for years. Yeah, and JC Auto also hints at elements of his private life that he would finally address head on the following year in 1994, when he came out as gay in an article in Spin magazine, despite it being a fairly open, and discussed secret in underground rock circles for many, many years. Either way, he drops the line, passing judgment on my life, you never really got it right. I'm not for a moment saying that Bob was outing himself in song form here, but it was clearly something that was weighing on him and something that he would confront within the next 12 months or so. And as the EP continues, it seems to prefigure this, almost eerily so, by following JC Auto with Feeling Better, which sounds, positively joyous by comparison, like a weight has been lifted. Yeah, in Feeling Better, he sings, I choose to give the gift of sight, the right to choose to give a life, the right to die, the right to teach, to think you're right, but not to preach. Yet for me, this is the one track here that feels like it could easily slip onto Copper Blue, and no one would really bat an eyelid. I do have one tiny niggle though, and I'm sorry to have to do this, but oh my God, that keyboard preset, it's not good. It may be the worst keyboard line since that monstrosity in The Walk by The Cure. Yeah, as Billy Bob Thornton says in Bad Santa, well now, they can't all be winners, can they? And finally, Beaster closes out with one of the most beautiful and most uncharacteristic, truth be told, songs that Bob has ever written, and that is Walking Away. Yeah, it's a woozy piece of, almost Brian Wilson-esque chamber pop, completely devoid of guitars. This circling church organ lines surround Bob's echoed, almost ghostly voice as he sings about walking my way back to you. Yeah, it sounds like it should be accompanying the kind of surreal David Lynch style, happy ending to all this kind of grim, emotional raking and self-reflection of the preceding 25 minutes or so of Beaster. Yeah, for quite an odd track, it feels a very necessary part of this story of Beaster, of Bob's post-Huskers journey, if you like, that found him finally able to enjoy his success in the shape of Sugar. Yeah, I think Beaster is still a fantastic listen, and it's a record that I would instinctively reach for over any other grunge or alt-rock record of that specific period. In fact, to go a little further, I think that opening 3-song run, that 1, 2, 3 of Come Around, Tilted, Judas Cradle, leading into JC Auto, I think it's one of the greatest stretches of songs that Bob ever managed to get down on record from Husker Du right up to the present day. And that's it for this episode. Yeah, a look back at Sugar and what I think is their finest record, which just happens in this case to be an EP. As usual, I welcome all your interactions, comments. I always try and respond if I can. And likes and subscriptions are really, really helpful to the ongoing health and success of this channel. But that's all for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm glad to see you again. You take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.